start with a roll call.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Chair Sneddon.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda?
We do have attendees online. If you would like to make a comment for an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand now. We have no public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we have 2 items for consideration today. We'll start with item 1, amendments to Title 30 to add an adaptive reuse ordinance. Thank you.
Good morning, council members. My name's Dana Falk. I'm a project planner with long range planning in community development, and I'm here today to talk to you about the adaptive reuse ordinance. The recommendation today is that Ordinance Committee consider the proposed adaptive reuse ordinance and forward the proposed ordinance to City Council for introduction and adoption. Determine that the ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and determine that the ordinance is consistent with the general plan as they forward it. To start off the discussion today, I'm going to go through a little bit of background of how we got to the proposed ordinance today, and then do a quick overview of the ordinance itself. The proposed adaptive reuse ordinance fulfills Housing Element Program HE1 to facilitate the conversion of non-residential buildings to housing. This Housing Element Program supports Housing Element Goal 1 to create new housing. And just as a note, the timeline for this program is expected to complete by December of 2025 of this year. To get a little more background on what is adaptive reuse, it's the conversion of buildings from their original purpose to accommodate new uses. We call this change in use in the city, and it's something we allow in our mixed use zoning where both residential and non-residential uses are allowed in the same area of town. Like I mentioned, adaptive reuse is change in use, and for this ordinance, adaptive reuse is specifically non-residential uses converted to residential uses. For example, this picture on the slide is 16 West Mission. It converted from an office to housing, so it'd be considered adaptive reuse. To get where we are today, we've had quite a few public hearings and touch points with the community, beginning with the housing element, which was adopted back in 2023, late December, and then certified by the state in 2024. We've had multiple touch points, both with City Council at a joint hearing about a year ago, as well as multiple focus groups, both internally with other staff and external focus groups that are interested in adaptive reuse, as well as touch points with both Planning Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, and the Architectural Board of Review. The most recent touch point was with Planning Commission on June 12th, where they recommended the proposed ordinance. Planning Commission's recommending motion included 3 items. Those are minor changes to the ordinance, request that staff report back to Planning Commission on the progress of adaptive reuse projects, as well as an expression of support to accelerate consideration of the inclusionary housing requirements. Staff has agreed with and incorporated the minor ordinance changes that Planning Commission recommended. Those include a change to the minimum building age for projects. Under the ordinance, staff had recommended 10 years. Planning Commission in their motion recommended it to 5. That's what's in the ordinance before you today. Planning Commission also recommended that the max average unit size for the rental units and ownership units were reduced. For rental, that's down to 800 square feet as a maximum average square footage, and for ownership units, that's 1,200 square feet for max average unit size. As part of the report back on adaptive reuse projects, staff does this annually in the general plan annual progress report, which is taken to Planning Commission and City Council in the spring before being submitted to HCD, which is Housing and Community Development State Department. So you will be seeing a progress report on adaptive reuse projects every year. And then the inclusionary housing requirements are being evaluated currently under a couple different housing element programs, most specifically Housing Element 13 to evaluate inclusionary housing ordinances, and that is ongoing at present and being done separately from the adaptive reuse ordinance today. With that, I'm going to jump into an overview of the proposed ordinance before you. The proposed definition for an adaptive reuse project is a change of use of all or any portion of an existing building envelope from non-residential use to one or more new residential units. For brevity, I'm only going to cover a couple of key topics, highlights of the proposed ordinance. The entire ordinance is in attachment 1 of the council agenda report today for more detail. As I mentioned, adaptive reuse projects must be converting existing non-residential buildings to housing. Those buildings must be 5 years old, and they must be within the existing building envelope itself. Arguably, the most noteworthy aspect of the ordinance is the area that it applies to. It's citywide, everywhere that multi-unit residential is allowed. That happens to be this map. The dark blue areas are focused on our core and commercial corridors. Those are areas where we have mixed-use zoning, so both non-residential and residential units, or uses, are allowed. And that's where the adaptive reuse ordinance would be available. The light blue are areas, zones that allow multi-unit residential with limited non-residential uses, also areas that this ordinance would be allowed. The areas denoted in gray are areas that don't allow multi-unit residential use, and therefore this ordinance would not be applicable. The ordinance includes 4 development incentives for projects that are within those areas and converting a non-residential building to housing. Those development incentives are density, open yard, parking, and setbacks. For density, there would be no maximum residential density for these projects. They're constrained by the existing building envelope, and an applicant can propose as many units as will fit in that building envelope, so there are no density maximums to additionally regulate on top of that. The open yard requirement, which is purely a residential development standard, is removed for these adaptive reuse projects. For vehicle parking, no additional parking beyond what is already available on site would be required, and there's also an adjustment to the ratio of parking requirements. And the final development incentive has to do with setbacks. Again, this is existing buildings that are converting, and so the setbacks that are existing when the building converts would be allowed. There are a few additional development standards and requirements I want to walk through quickly. Some of them are specifically for adaptive reuse projects and only for adaptive reuse projects, as well as highlight a few of the existing multi-unit residential requirements that remain in place for adaptive reuse projects. So the first, the requirement specifically for adaptive reuse, is a maximum average unit size. This would allow a project to propose units of multiple different sizes and have a maximum average across those. Like I mentioned, Planning Commission did make adjustments to these from what we proposed to them. That's 800 square feet as a maximum average for a rental unit and 1,200 for an ownership unit. The other requirement for adaptive reuse projects is a non-residential ground floor on State Street. That's to align with some other city initiatives to activate State Street, and it's just a requirement for the facade right behind the frontage of State Street for a certain area that we can discuss more. And then some of the existing requirements that these projects must meet I want to touch upon include inclusionary housing, the stormwater management program, a minimum unit size, and bike parking. Staff is not proposing that the adaptive reuse ordinance make any changes to these existing requirements, so any projects that are being developed and utilizing the proposed ordinance would have to meet these in place and existing standards. So inclusionary housing, I do want to note, staff is evaluating it as a separate work effort that will be coming to you, and we're looking at inclusionary housing holistically, not just for adaptive reuse projects. So that's why we're recommending that adaptive reuse projects must meet the existing inclusionary housing requirements in place. And then those other ones are stormwater management. Existing projects already must meet this. They must still meet it. There is a minimum unit size that corresponds with that no maximum residential density that I just talked about a second ago. And then bike parking is not amended. You still have to meet the bike parking requirements in the ordinance for multi-unit residential. One sec, I flipped too soon. I do want to quickly talk about the permit review process for these adaptive reuse projects. Because we're proposing these as development incentives, there is a chance that projects would not require a land use decision. Right now they do under our current ordinance. As zoning modification, that's a discretionary hearing. It can make a process a little bit longer in planning review, but with these incentives there would be no zoning modification, therefore no discretionary hearing, so it could amount to fewer fees and a reduced permitting duration for these projects. Additionally, a requirement for larger AUD projects, that's average unit size density incentive program, there's a pre-application and concept review requirement for projects of a certain size, that would not be required for adaptive reuse projects. Again, they're reusing an existing building, so some of those conversations aren't necessary. In essence, a project could potentially proceed straight to building permit with this change to development incentives proposed in this ordinance and bypass planning entitlement review completely if they meet all of the thresholds here. With that, I'm going to talk through next steps for this ordinance and review the recommendation. Any ordinance amendment in the city requires 4 public hearings. We're at the second of those right now. Like I mentioned, we went to Planning Commission on June 12th. They recommended the proposed ordinance. We're here with you today, and pending today's outcome, we will be going to City Council for introduction and adoption in September, hopefully the 9th and the 16th. Like as I mentioned, the Housing Element Program timeline for this one is December 2025, so we're hoping we can get done sooner, which would be pretty fantastic. With that, for environmental review, I'm just going to read this straight from the council agenda report. Staff has determined this action qualifies for an exemption from further environmental review under Section 15061B3 General Rule of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines because it can be seen with certainty that the ordinance will not have a significant effect on the environment. This is on page 5 of the council agenda report. All zoning ordinance amendments must be consistent with our general plan, and staff has determined that the proposed adaptive reuse ordinance is consistent with the general plan policies and programs that encourage adaptive reuse, a mix of land uses, sustainable neighborhood planning, and infill housing. With that, the recommendation for today's item is that Ordinance Committee consider the proposed adaptive reuse ordinance and forward it to City Council for introduction and adoption. Determine that the ordinance is exempt from CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, and determine that the ordinance is consistent with the general plan. That concludes staff presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Falk. Excellent presentation and work on this. We have questions from the committee. Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just have a couple. So the questions come up on trying to fit 3-bedroom units into a development and end up running afoul of the 1,000 average square foot, right? And so I imagine your answer would be, well, you just play with the other units there and drive their size down to move your average down, right? Like if you needed, I'm sorry, it's 800. I'm talking about rentals. So
800, okay.
Yeah, so if you needed 1,000, let's say for a rental 3-bedroom, then the only option under proposed would be then to drive down the size of your other units to try and bring the average.
Councilmember Jordan, that is correct, yes.
Okay. Have you, is there any thought to tiering that math so that, say you retain the average 800 units, 800 square feet for studio 1 and 2 bedrooms, but you gave them, say, 1,000 average for anything that included at least 1 3-bedroom? I mean, is there a method there to play with that somehow in the nuts and bolts to acknowledge that there might be a market for, particularly in the downtown corridor? I know this is wider than that, but my focus is really in downtown corridor, to give a pathway to getting to a 3-bedroom without having to go to a community development director for some type of approval, maybe. But that would, and if you were still saying, well, I want to do normal 1-bedrooms, so I don't want to do studios to offset that size and drive down my average, is there a way to talk about tiering that so that I'd get an additional cap size if I was doing 3-bedroom, but it'd be a lower cap size if I was doing studio 1 and 2 bedrooms?
Councilman Jordan, yes is the short answer. I will say staff was very deliberate in how they crafted the ordinance to make it simple and flexible to try not to create that minutia in how the max average unit sizes were calculated, but it's possible.
How do we come up with that number, 800 square foot average? that we're mimicking the AUD, right?
Correct. Initially, yes, we looked at what was done when the average unit size density incentive program was established back in the general plan and then in ordinance in 2013. We did take a different value to Planning Commission, and as part of their deliberation and motion to get to the hearing today, they did reduce the maximum average unit size for those units. So it's adjustable.
Okay. Then my other question is, I didn't hear all you said about the existing requirements thing, but I swear when we talked the other day that nothing in this ordinance would trigger, if you met the ordinance, would trigger a stormwater management action on the project. Is that true or not true?
Staff evaluated recent planning applications and completed projects that could be considered adaptive reuse, meaning they converted an existing non-residential building to housing. It is included in the June 12th Planning Commission hearing as an exhibit where we looked at 9 change in use projects. And I'm doing this from memory, so I will double check while I try to talk about it. But from our findings, I want to say that 6 of the 9 were actually exempt from stormwater requirements. 2 of them required Tier 1 and 1 of them required Tier 2. So staff anticipates that projects going forward under this ordinance, because they are constrained to the existing building envelope, would not potentially trigger the stormwater requirements, but I couldn't say for certain that they wouldn't. It's just based on our findings and extrapolating what the requirements are of the ordinance, they probably won't.
So, but
is probably the
by
best way to say
memory, 6 were exempt.
Let me double check real quick. 'Cause it's
Oh,
in the staff
I'll just
report.
use those ballparks. And so 9, 6 were exempt, 1 was in the lowest compliance level, right?
Yeah,
So 7 out of 9 were like kind
Tier
of
1 or exempt.
negligible, right?
Yeah, and real quick, we did even do research into what those requirements were for best management practices, BMPs, and how they met the tier requirements. We did coordinate with Creek staff to put this together. And of the projects that did require some kind of swamp mitigation, they were able to utilize permeable pavers or to reduce the amount of impervious area to meet the requirements
Okay.
of our
But
stormwater.
that does add a process to adaptable reuse projects, right?
Yes.
It's going through a process to determine that.
Exterior changes would require, yeah.
So could you not flip it and make them exempt unless something was occurring? So could you take those 6 examples for sure, but 7, I call Tier 1 pretty negligible. You can put a storm drain collector barrel out or something, right, for a Tier 1, I think, sometimes. So, but could you find a way to say you're exempt unless you fall into one of those traps, so that you wouldn't have to go through the review process if you were just showing that you were exempt? I'm just trying to look to take away another barrier or process in the project.
Councilmember Jordan, if I could respond to that. What makes that difficult is stormwater is not part of our zoning ordinance, and it is an ordinance that's been reviewed by the Regional Quality Control Board and adopted by them. So we can't easily make changes to
Okay.
it.
Welcome to our bureaucracy, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any other questions? No? Okay, do we have public comment on this item?
Oh, we do. Our first speaker will be Diane Black.
I guess that's what happens when you come early.
Yes, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Sneddon and members of the Ordinance Committee. My name's Diane Black, and I'm speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara. We strongly support the proposed adaptive reuse ordinance as it's drafted. We view this ordinance as as a key strategy to address the city's urgent housing crisis, aligning with community values of sustainability, equity, and responsible planning, and supporting economic development on State Street and other areas in the city. We commend the staff for listening carefully to the Planning Commission, to the City Council, and to the public in the draft of this ordinance before you. And we're particularly happy with the following elements: applying existing inclusionary housing provisions for adaptive reuse projects, the flexibility and development standards, the clarification that a project must comply with environmental review if it's triggered, and the preservation of the exterior character and neighborhood compatibility. We especially appreciate the staff's recommendation to require active ground floor uses on key corridors such as State Street, and I think that's really an important part of the ordinance. We understand that some developers are requesting that the city waive all affordability requirements for affordable or for adaptive reuse projects, and we strongly oppose that at this time. A citywide inclusionary housing policy is too important and precedent-setting to be decided in a data vacuum and without considering the important policy issues of inclusionary housing, including integrating affordable housing into market rate projects. That's why we support revisiting any changes to the inclusionary housing requirements for adaptive reuse after the city releases its BAE financial feasibility nexus study and considers the ordinance as a whole. In the interim, we recommend that the city pursue development agreements with property owners who don't think they can comply with the letter of the inclusionary housing ordinance and want more flexibility. These agreements could explore creative solutions and might help us in actually developing any changes to our inclusionary housing ordinance. So with that, we recommend that you forward this to the full council for adoption, and we are really happy that this program happened even sooner than we had programmed in the housing element. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Black. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Barry Tower.
Good afternoon, Barry Tower with the Coastal Housing Coalition and a housing advocate. Good afternoon, council members, administrator. Two quick points. One, adaptive reuse just makes sense, right? We need units. The one major objection to getting units is changing the character of the city, and adaptively reusing buildings does not affect that at all. So it's a great way to get units. The second point is that it's widely accepted in the development planning in architectural communities that inclusionary housing will kill any units. So we recommend that the inclusionary provision be dropped unless it goes to 200% of the AMI. But otherwise, we strongly support staff's work and strongly support the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tower. Next speaker.
Robin Elander.
Good afternoon, Ordinance Committee members. My name is Robin Elander, Executive Director for the Downtown Santa Barbara Improvement Association, speaking today upon behalf of our board and the Housing Task Force. We appreciate the city's leadership in pursuing an adaptive reuse ordinance. It's very important for our community at this time. Converting underutilized commercial buildings into housing is a critical strategy for our downtown where space is limited and vacancy remains a challenge. After reviewing the draft, we are generally supportive of all that staff has worked on, but we are in opposition to applying inclusionary housing requirements to the adaptive reuse project in the Central Business District. These projects are already financially complex, and additional mandates will likely deter investment and result in no housing at all. To improve feasibility, we urge Council to exempt inclusionary housing requirements within the Central Business District for adaptive reuse, remove average unit size caps for both rental and for sale housing, allow additional floors outside existing shells where appropriate. We also support preserving active ground floor commercial uses, minimizing code barriers such as the things that Councilmember Jordan was mentioning when the building envelope is maintained, and streamlining regulations to prioritize actual housing production. Without these changes, we risk passing a well-intentioned ordinance that delivers little impact. Let's prioritize flexibility and remove the barriers that stand in the way of revitalizing downtown and adding as much needed housing as possible. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Elander. We have next speaker.
Craig Minnos.
Good morning, how are you? My name is Craig Minus. I'm the owner and operator of CAM Land Use and Development, a consulting firm rooted in urban planning. I serve as the executive director for the Coastal Housing Coalition, and I previously spent 15 years working alongside Mike Tubbs. Over the course of my career here on the Central Coast, I've seen a wide range of land use policies, some that sparked real, lasting change, and many that, unfortunately, ended up sitting on a shelf. Adaptive reuse presents a powerful opportunity. It allows us to preserve the character of our city, deliver much-needed housing, and revitalize our urban core with the critical mass necessary to sustain local retail, dining, and small business. In my opinion, the city did an excellent job with the average unit density program. For the first time in the decade, Santa Barbara saw new market rate housing units. I urge you to listen again, hear the feedback of the development community, and shape this ordinance to something that will deliver units from day one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minus.
Our next speaker is Cody Sargent.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cody Sargent. I'm a local land use attorney with Brownstein Hyatt, speaking today just in my individual capacity. I'll keep my comments really brief. I just mainly wanted to echo the comments made by Coastal Housing Coalition. Absolutely support developing an adaptive reuse program that incentivizes development of a diverse range of housing options and commend the city on its efforts to do so. However, I agree with the comments made that the proposed ordinance includes unnecessary and overburdensome requirements, predominantly the inclusionary housing requirements. These barriers conflict with the city's own housing element policies, arguably violate recent Supreme Court decision in Sheets versus El Dorado, and most importantly, they drastically reduce the effectiveness of this important program. And so while commend the staff on the ordinance, we urge the city to remove these barriers and further analyze the potential effectiveness of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sargent.
Our final speaker will be Casa Ensberg.
We do have one online. Good afternoon, Chair Sneddon and Ordinance Committee members. I'm Cassandra Ensberg. I'm a local architect and here today speaking for myself and not in any other capacity. As always, I thank the staff for their great work, and I want to say that I agree with Ms. Black's comments from the League of Women Voters. I support the adaptive reuse ordinance as proposed, and I hope that it will be effective in producing more housing, including affordable housing, and to fill vacant spaces in downtown. I want to take this moment to just highlight our great challenge, which is to effectively produce affordable housing. Housing that's integrated and designed in balance with the size and aesthetic of our town, which this ordinance and adaptive reuse is perfect to do. I want to just remind, this also to say, I think we have a lot more to talk about in terms of, the realities of things and for the for-profit developers and how this all works. But I think for now, we should support it. I just want to summarize by saying that of the 8,001 units that are required in this cycle, 4,969, or 62.1%, is the target for affordable. And that is, of course, extremely low, very low, and moderate incomes. 3,032, or 39.9%, is the target for the market rate. We are challenged to get to the affordable levels. From 2018 to 2024, affordable unit deliveries were just under 4% of the goal, while market rate is around 38% of the goal. Until such time that people have living wages and subsidies are no longer required, and to successfully meet our goals in balance between increased density for housing and preservation of community scale, I believe that the adaptive reuse should include the inclusionary, and that we should keep working to find funding sources for affordable housing and consider, explore at least, reinstatement of the redevelopment agency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Enberg.
And Chair Sneddon, we do have an individual online who has raised his hand, Ben Romo. Ben Romo, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, thanks. Thanks, members of the Ordinance Committee, council members. I'm speaking today on behalf of myself and my clients, Jason and Kevin Yardy. We're very excited about this policy and appreciate the staff's work on this and the city considering this. And we are most excited because creating housing downtown is one of our community's most effective strategies for revitalizing State Street and surrounding areas. We've done or are doing 4 conversions like this. One of them, as you may recall, was 821 State, the old Sur La Table building, where we got the housing entitled and permitted, and then the owner, Jason Yardy, donated the building to the Housing Authority, and those units are now full. Another project we have at 12 East Carrillo is not a philanthropic one, but we are looking at maybe breaking even. No other developer would do this, and the city cannot realistically expect them to do this. Making these projects pencil is very difficult. Imposing the city's inclusionary requirements on adaptive reuse projects will kill most projects downtown. We strongly recommend passing this policy, but excluding projects in the central business district specifically from the inclusionary ordinance. Staff says, and has shared in the staff report and in past meetings, that they prefer passing the adaptive reuse policy now, but waiting for a study before deciding whether adaptive reuse projects should be excluded from the inclusionary ordinance. Make no mistake about it, that will take years. The study is one step. It is meant to inform revisions to the inclusionary ordinance. That requires a long, long process. The policy you're considering today, for example, had its first public meeting nearly 4 years ago. We need housing downtown now, not years from now. Revitalizing downtown should not be postponed for years. Finally, we also have concerns about the average unit size limits in this latest draft of the ordinance. Families need housing too. The 800 square foot average unit size limit on rental projects will make it very difficult to produce 3-bedroom units, which serve families. I thank you very much for considering my input and for your service to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Romo. And do we have any other?
We have one more speaker, John Campanella. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate what's been done on the proposal. I think a lot of thought went into it, and it's really nice to see the encouragement to readapt the buildings that are currently non-residential to residential. I'd just like to enforce a comment that Mr. Roma made. The original staff recommendation for rental average size was 1,200 square feet. This was reduced to 800 square feet at the last Planning Commission meeting, and I didn't watch the whole meeting, but I didn't understand the reason for that reduction. Average unit size density program currently is probably in 1,000, 1,200 square foot range for rental housing, excluding the community benefit overlay. There are many people in the city that have households over the 2.3 person average. That's the average for the city. They have needs for housing as well. Their housing needs are not going to be fulfilled by expensive for sale. They need to have rentals as well. So if you're talking about young families, growing families, multi-generational housing, we have to start somewhere in allowing developers to increase the size of units. So I recommend that you look at maybe looking at the 800 square foot and getting it back close to 1,200 square feet, you could still have a mix of product, but you can do 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms without having to resort to studios, et cetera, to get an 800 square foot average. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campanella. Do we have any other speakers?
Chair Sneddon, no further speakers.
Okay, thank you. So it is back to the committee. Do we have any comments yet? I'll have one question while we're waiting. Oh, Mr. Jordan. What is the timeline for receiving the inclusionary nexus study? When is that coming?
Chair Sneddon, that study is currently being worked on by BAE, as mentioned, and we are hoping to get a draft out in the next, I'd say, approximately 2 months. We're working pretty closely with the consultant on some revisions and additional information that we want included, one of which is specifically addressing adaptive reuse. And so then we will be scheduling conversations with council and planning commission, and then moving forward with any ordinance amendments based on direction from city council.
Thank you, and that could happen within a year? Those
Yes,
ordinance
I
changes?
anticipate that would happen within a year.
Okay, thank you so much. And then Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you. And another question, Allison, I think that's probably for you. So this is like a nightmare question last night. So what happens if this passes and then somebody wants to do a bonus density project through the AR ordinance, and I guess you'll have to school me on what are the range of concessions starting with one concession that you asked for, and they say they want to use the AR ordinance but add a story, or say they're going to use the AR ordinance and blow through your average unit size percent, number, that type of thing. Are we just at the mercy of that as long as that legislation is in effect?
Councilmember Jordan, that is a very good question and something that we have thought about, and I will let the city attorney jump in and add anything that I miss. But our initial thought is that there wouldn't be much need to use state bonus density because you can get unlimited density under this program. So by using the state density bonus ordinance, they would be imposing low income or very low income restrictions on themselves. So we were trying to think of a scenario where it may be beneficial to use it. That said, the issue of additional stories, the way that we have viewed that is you could do adaptive reuse within your existing building shell. If you want to add additional stories, then you're subject to the standard zoning density limitations. So that would be in addition to whatever you got within the existing structure. And if you're downtown, could be up to 63 dwelling units per acre. So that's not a low density, that is a high density. And so we do think that that would be available. But this is a special program, and so we do feel that it is outside of state density bonus. This is kind of a unique carve-out, and so that's how we have approached it so far.
Until otherwise, right? Like usual, right? Okay. There's a lot to like here. I think, one of the unwritten choices that are never in what we do is the choice to do nothing. Because it's not us doing it, it's somebody else doing it. And so, historically and currently downtown, and I'll just preface this, that really my main focus is really focusing on downtown for this ordinance. Not really, I get it goes across the whole city in particular zones, but my focus is downtown. And so downtown is already littered with choices of doing nothing. Old buildings, not maintained well, not underutilized for what they could be contributing to the community. And so it always worries me when we start doing something on the choices that we are giving as something better, that still the choice remains to do nothing because it's really not better enough. I mean, when we kind of say, well, if you don't like this, you can go the regular path, right? So it's just kind of like, life imprisonment or death penalty, right? One or the other. So it's not really a choice. And what worries me is that when we incentivize, we also then begin to restrict choices that exist already, rather than incentivize by maintaining what's offered there already, but making what we want you to do way, way better than any of the other existing choices. So just pick on, for no reason, just pick on a little hotel or something that might want to do that. And so we've taken that choice away, or would like to take that choice away. But have we really offered then something that really makes then our adaptive reuse the first choice? And so then we start talking about, well, are we doing that, or are we still putting limiters there? To your example in stormwater management, you looked at 9 other projects that could have qualified. My response to that is, how many projects do you just not see that would fit in a projected box for use of this, because they don't follow, they know they would never be able to feasibly meet the stormwater requirements for their project. So you might have seen 9 go through that had a certain level, but how many people are just leaving their little 100-year-old building there because they know they can't get there, and so they're never used as an example. So I think that still becomes a limiter. And then, the elephant in the room is the inclusionary stuff. And I have a couple comments on that. And one is that we're continuing to look at downtown as 10 or 11 blocks of commercial/retail area in this. It's whatever it is up to Sola Street, right? And I think all of Mike Jordan thinks that is way too long of a commercial/retail district. It's done. Retail's not coming back for 10 or 11 blocks. Downtown offices are not coming back for 10 or 11 blocks. So why are we not taking the opportunity to actually focus on what is an appropriate length of a street for State Street, to actually focus on adaptive reuse and putting housing where it is, and where would the core be that needs to be commercial and retail in that, so whatever that is, 5 blocks out of the 10. Maybe it's 5 in the middle and 2 or 3 on each edge. And then why don't we adjust our policies accordingly and say that the ones in the middle are, if they're not already, they're going to be soon the most expensive real estate, and can we continue to burden those with inclusionary housing or in lieu fee on top of that, rather than put it on the outskirts where in theory, the land would be cheaper? And why would we not only burden that interior section where we are focusing on with the commercial street level envelope, and on the outer parts of that say, oh no, we'll take housing right down to the floor level and right out to the street, because that is not going to be the future core, the retail and commercial core in the city of Santa Barbara. I see this much more as no, that's not true. I see this equally, but not reflected in what we're looking at today. I see this equally as a structured ordinance for economic vitality as I do for housing, not as something for housing that will lead to economic vitality. And I think we're not looking at it that way necessarily. We're looking at this as, we got some old buildings, let's put some housing in them that'll get people down there, but then we're missing the point on, we're doing it on 10 or 12 blocks, and we're not going to have commercial and retail activity for 10 or 12 blocks. So I would like to see more discussion on choices, on what would be in this ordinance. So I think there's credible cases made already on the inability to build housing with inclusionary. I know this, the fees, the the study that everybody's looking forward to is going to go the wrong direction for including inclusionary or in lieu fees on housing. They're going to find that it's much more expensive than we already thought we were dealing with. And people like me that says, well, if Rob Fredericks is building $1 million units, then we need to extract $1 million if you don't want to build your unit. Well, we're going to go the other way, where the pittance that we're extracting right now is already going to be shown to be a terrible burden on new development. So my choice would be that we continue to work on this. We look at reducing the commercial retail section of State Street and having the outlying areas be treated different in terms of commercial or retail space at the ground level, in terms of where we're applying inclusionary or in lieu fees, in terms of where we're applying triggers for stormwater management, with a focus on whatever that core is, whatever we can make a case for that starting core, if it's 3, 4, or 5 blocks, whatever it is, that's where our focus should be, on economically driving that downtown vitality with some housing, but doing it in a manner that will drive shared economic vitality between housing and the commercial aspect, and then focus on the outside parts of those, the lower side, if there is a lower side, but certainly the upper side, as being the area where we adapt more of like what this is. But we let the housing go down to the street level. We apply inclusionary housing. We apply stormwater management triggers, that type of thing. I've been doing this a long time with you, and I always chafe a little bit about getting something that's out of the oven and baked already, and then getting a real first chance at, well, what do I think about it, other than a quick meeting the other day. And so that's kind of where I'd like to see this. One other point I have written here, kind of just out of context and orders, but I've seen emails that say we're giving the employer the developer something, and so we need to extract inclusionary housing or stormwater management improvements. I would say just the opposite. We're in the position right now where we're pretty much asking people to come help us redevelop downtown. We're not in a position where we're giving anything away right now. We're on the wrong end of that relationship. We're looking for partners because we need partners to help us improve downtown, and we can't do it ourselves. So that's my comments. Wide-ranging and probably confusing, but thanks.
We expect no less, Councilmember Jordan. So I'll make some comments here too. This is very exciting. I'm very excited to see this today. Really excellent work on the part of staff who's here, but also those who've been working on this for years. I know I've been talking about it since 2017, and I know people have talked about it since before then. So this is the team that's really made it happen. So thank you. Thank you for bringing it today. So I think the ordinance as is, I support it. I think we can make changes to it later based on data. I think this ordinance addresses critical housing needs. We've heard about that a lot, but also revitalization, and not just in the downtown. A lot of comments about just downtown, but I'm thinking Upper State Street has many hotels that really are maybe not living their best and highest use, that could be housing very easily adapted over. And some of those are largely vacant, different opportunities there. So just looking holistically at the city, I think this is really the best place to start, is using our existing inclusionary, which we really grappled over and did consider those economic differences of the downtown donut hole versus Upper State versus outer lying areas. And I'm really confident that we'll have that robust discussion with the Nexus study when it comes back, and I'm sure we'll have those same discussions about inclusionary or in lieu fees and what to really give those incentives to get it going. But I think this is the place to start. It's addressing modernization of unused spaces, those long corridors of shops that really can't sustain that anymore, that maybe part of that is living, and then part of that now can be a shop that is sustainable and will be revitalizing those spaces. We've talked for a long time about vacuous, empty spaces and all the different uses, but right now they can't be easily reconfigured, but with this ordinance they could be. I think it's also sustainability-wise, promoting reuse is a bonus on this one. I like the assumptions about the stormwater, that no big changes to that because you're basing it on the envelope as is. It's supported by HLC, Planning Commission, and housing advocates, and those who have made comments otherwise largely support it, but maybe have some comments about the inclusionary. And I think our Nexus study, we've put staff behind that, resources behind that, and I think we owe it to that process to hear it all the way out before we really make any changes on that one too. I mean, it may turn out that the Nexus study advises that we increase those fees or collect them in a different way. So I don't think we should assume at this point that they'll be higher or lower until we get that study. So in my mind, this is just a home run. I'm really grateful you've brought it forward, and now we do have this to be able to discuss the individual points of it. And if we are satisfied that it is good to go to council for further discussion, or Councilmember Jordan, were you suggesting that we keep it in ordinance or move it on? I think those are all of our comments. I'm prepared to move it on. I don't know if there's...
I'm prepared to move it as well.
Is that a motion?
I'll make the motion
Okay.
to move staff recommendation.
Councilmember Jordan. Well, if there isn't another second, oh, you're not. Okay, then I will second the motion. So for discussion, Councilmember
Yes.
Jordan?
So just that motion, I would prefer that it go back and get some more work with some choices. I think all the things I talked about, I don't know all the answers to. I'm the least knowledgeable, that one at the table. And I would prefer that those choices be vetted and addressed as part of the ordinance committee process before it goes to council. So I'll not be supporting this.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Jordan. I suppose my concern would be slowing it down. And so if you wouldn't mind, would you mind articulating the choices so that we have them for the record, and so when it moves forward? If you wouldn't mind.
Sure, not at all. So exemption from inclusionary units or fees, if not the entire length of the ordinance as it's portrayed now, or in key areas, particularly in the downtown core where the land is most expensive. Tiered square footage caps or some other method of working towards accommodating larger bedroom projects without then adversely affecting the other units to only be studios. A revision of the number of blocks the ordinance applies to, that 10 or 11 or 12 blocks is too much of a space. And limiting choices, just the structure of an incentive, limiting choices rather than offering an incentive that is better than the existing choices in the order. The example in the ordinance is specifically calling out hotels as no longer allowed as a way to limit the choices without actually improving the choice that you're trying to push. And I don't remember if I mentioned stormwater, but stormwater concerns me too. Stormwater is just a big bugaboo in the downtown area, and I think our stats are to look at that as if, oh, it was or wasn't a problem on submitted projects, but my point would be how many projects never even see the light of day because of our existing stormwater triggers and our inability so far to address that in a way that still accomplishes stormwater, whether that's off-site contribution or pooling your stormwater efforts with other properties, that type of thing.
Thank you, Councilwoman Jordan. And to staff, do you have any comments on any of those recommendations at this time?
Councilmember Jordan, and through the chair, I would just say that in terms of the geographic area for where commercial was identified, we did align with the State Street Master Plan, which also uses the same geographic area as the objective design and development standards. And yes, that may be viewed as a large area to require commercial, but then there's also pros and cons of creating separate geographic boundaries for every single program that we do, which also creates confusion. And so in many ways, just being consistent can be helpful to developers. So just so that you understand some of the rationale behind the geographic area that we chose. In terms of the average unit size and wanting to create a little bit more flexibility for larger units, I do think that the simplest way would just be to have a larger average unit size. So maybe moving back closer to where staff's recommendation was, although Planning Commission recommended something smaller, and we understand, why they wanted to do that is to facilitate smaller units and not have people doing the 800 square foot studios, which as you may recall, used to happen when we had variable density rather than moving to the average unit size. So there's a lot of different considerations. In terms of inclusionary, we are always keeping an eye on our RENA numbers and understanding that we do have a mandate to meet these moderate income levels, and that is one of the reasons why we maintained it. But as we said, we view this as I think the general plan uses the term adaptive management. It is something we want to continue looking at and continue seeing, hey, this held up a property owner from doing it. Can we look at other incentives? We definitely looked at there aren't a lot of things we can give away, in terms of zoning things. Our arsenal is a little bit limited, but I do think the inclusionary is one of the biggest ones, and so we will absolutely be revisiting that, but we did want additional data before making that final call on this ordinance. And also from staff's perspective, it is something that we are excited to implement, and so we additional time that it's not in place means additional projects that might have taken advantage of it can't take advantage of it. So just a pitch for moving it forward. Thank you.
I appreciate all that and your enthusiasm. Of course, I just, the history, my personal history has at least shown that our best intents on adaptive management frequently extend into years. So the moment you pass something, it's going to be there for a couple of years, and I just I don't know that I can actually just get my hands around that and support that right now without some of these other. I mean, you've heard all this, and you've done your best to figure out what it is. But for example, your proposal at the Planning Commission was higher square footage, I'm sorry, lower square footage. You brought that from them, even though yours was higher square footage. Their proposal to you was a percentage of commercial's present square footage on the ground floor, and you brought a foot one. So there's a lot of picking and choosing, and you've heard much of what I've said you've already heard already. Just what I said actually just resonates with me more than is in the current project. So I get that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I think with that, we're ready to take a vote.
Staff recommendation moved by Councilmember Gutierrez, seconded by Chair Sneddon, that the Ordinance Committee consider the proposed adaptive reuse ordinance and forward the proposed recommendations to City Council for introduction and adoption. B, determine that the ordinance is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. And C, determine that the ordinance is consistent with the general plan and forward the proposed adapted reuse ordinance to City Council for introduction and adoption.
I have a question on that,
Yeah.
actually. Since the motion is for introduction and adoption, would that still leave space to consider Councilmember Jordan's considerations at the council level, since we have different recommendations from Planning Commission, staff a little bit? Would that still be?
Chair Sneddon, yes, the
Okay.
council can choose to change it if they.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and vote. Okay, we have 2 that are for it, and Mike Jordan is assenting.
Okay, thank you so much. That moves forward, and we'll have further discussion at council. Thank you. Okay, and now moving on to our second item, introduction of ordinance for water metering for adaptive reuse projects.
Good afternoon, Chair Sneddon and committee members. My name is Dakota Corey. I'm the acting Water Resources Manager. And our item follows on the item that you just heard. Back in January, we brought an ordinance to council for metering requirements for 100% adaptive, affordable adaptive reuse projects. And at that time, council asked us to look at whether or not it would be feasible and make sense for the city to expand those metering requirements for all adaptive reuse projects, not just 100% affordable projects. And so we've been working closely with community development as they develop their adaptive reuse ordinance. And so this is our small piece of that bigger effort today.
Thank you, Ms. Corey. Good afternoon, Chair Sneddon and council members Gutierrez and Jordan. My name is Katie Munster, and I'm a water resources specialist. And as Ms. Corey introduced, I'll be speaking to you today about the proposed ordinance for water metering requirements for adaptive reuse projects. So just a quick outline of this presentation today. I'll begin with some background information on what initiated the review of water metering requirements for adaptive reuse projects. And then I'll be reviewing private submetering and the proposed ordinance amending section 14.08.150 of the city's municipal code. And then I'll review Water Commission's input on this, next steps, and the recommendation for ordinance committee. So as Ms. Corey introduced, an ordinance was recently adopted by City Council that updated water metering requirements for adaptive reuse projects that are 100% affordable housing. At the ordinance introduction on January 14th, City Council requested that staff review water metering requirements for all adaptive reuse projects, regardless of housing affordability designation. So as community development has been working on their proposed adaptive reuse ordinance that was presented today, water resources staff have been working to understand how water metering would fit into this larger initiative. And it's important to note that when we discuss eligible adaptive reuse projects, we are referring to the qualification parameters that are included in community development's proposed ordinance that would add section 30.185.045 to the city's municipal code. So the community development's definition that's included in their proposed ordinance is a change of use of all or any portion of an existing building envelope from non-residential use to one or more new residential units. And for more context on our water metering requirements, we'll review private submetering for individual dwelling units. The city has a long-standing requirement of individual metering of each dwelling unit. This helps to create a relationship between the city and the customer and helps to promote water use efficiency. However, private submetering is authorized when there are constraints in the right-of-way that prohibit city metering in the public right-of-way. So when private submetering is authorized, a city master meter is in the public right-of-way that serves all of the residential dwelling units. And private submeters are installed on the private plumbing that will measure the water use of each individual dwelling unit. So there are requirements for private submetering. The city's municipal code does lay out the requirements for what qualifies, for when a project qualifies for submetered service. And the municipal code also specifies that the property owner is responsible for all aspects of submetered service. So that would include reading the submeters, billing, and collection. In California, Senate Bill 7 governs the installation, maintenance, reading, billing, and testing of those submeters. And the County of Santa Barbara Weights and Measures Division inspects those submeters. So after research and consideration of water metering requirements, staff is proposing this following ordinance that would amend section 14.08.150 of the municipal code. And this proposed ordinance would allow residential private submetering for projects that qualify as adaptive reuse according to the proposed section 30.185.045. And as I just discussed, private submetering already is allowed for all projects when there are constraints in the right-of-way. So this ordinance would allow private submetering for all adaptive reuse projects regardless of regardless of the right-of-way. And just as for all projects that have private submetering, all other metering and water conservation requirements will remain. So that would include the requirement to separately meter residential and commercial uses, irrigation meter requirements that are based on landscapes of a certain size, and the city's water efficient landscape standards as well. And just to clarify, while this ordinance only impacts adaptive reuse projects, for all other projects, the option of private submetering will remain when there are constraints in the right-of-way. So this was discussed at Water Commission on April 17th. And Water Commission recommended allowing private submetering for all eligible adaptive reuse projects, and they voted in favor of staff's recommendation. Their recommendation supported consistency with Planning Commission. So this proposed ordinance is intended to align with Community Development's ordinance by allowing private submetering for adaptive reuse projects that qualify according to that proposed Community Development's ordinance. So just next steps for this proposed ordinance. The timeline for our ordinance is intended to follow the same track as Community Development's ordinance. So we're introducing this ordinance here today and then potentially returning in September for introduction at City Council. And the recommendation for Ordinance Committee is that staff is recommending that Ordinance Committee forward to City Council for introduction and adoption an ordinance amending section 14.08.150 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Okay, Councilmember Jordan.
This is a good thing, right? Because like particularly in the area we're talking about where it's lot line to lot line along the front of the building and your water mains out in the middle of the street, that our only other option would be to like put 20 little water meter boxes out on the sidewalk, right? And this allows people then to get them up, because that garage might have been across from the old Paradise Cafe, right? I don't know, but that was a situation there where they were going to have to put like 30 water boxes out on the public sidewalk there and deal with people tripping over the little things that don't close all the way and that kind of thing. So super good thing. That would be my framing it, right? Yes. Okay. Yes. So happy to support this.
Excellent. Do we have any public comment?
We do, Chair Sneddon. We have one individual online who would like to speak on this item. Ben Romo, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I'm the biggest nerd in town who's sitting around watching a hearing on water meters. And I really don't mean to diminish staff's work on this because it's super important, and I really, really appreciate what your staff team has done on this and what the Water Commission has done and Council's direction to make this available to all adaptive reuse projects. I mentioned earlier, that I was involved at the 821 State project, and this issue came up. Our desire to do submetering on that project. Are you there? Am I still there?
Yes.
Sorry. In that project, just to give you a little context, it would have cost us about $50,000 to $75,000 to have individual meters for each unit, each of the 14 units at 821 State. And when we were looking at that, that was a big economic burden for a project where we had in mind a philanthropic intent. We weren't sure if we were going to ultimately do that. But the city coming in and helping us with that really did help make that project possible. I can tell you from ownership's perspective, it was one of the selling points for doing the project. So I just wanted to commend the city and city staff for doing this work. It might not be the most exciting work in the public's eyes, but it is appreciated very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Romo. Do we have any other public comment on this item?
No further speakers.
Okay, so it is to the committee. Councilmember Jordan?
I'll just move the staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Jordan,
Second?
second by Councilmember Gutierrez, and I think we're ready for a vote.
Recommendation moved by Councilmember Jordan, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez, that the ordinance committee forward to City Council for introduction an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Section 4.08.150 to the Santa Barbara Municipal Code relating to water meters for adaptive reuse projects. We'll go ahead and vote. And that passes unanimously.
I didn't ever push a button. I think this is just the attendance. This is the attendance screen. There we go.
It disappeared.
We pushed our buttons and hit save, but it disappeared. Should we do a voice vote? Okay.
So Councilmember Gutierrez. Yes. Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
And Chair Snedden.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
So much. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.